I'm Connor Old, and welcome back to another episode of Old Oscar Countdown, a weekly show where we talk about the Oscars, what I think is going to get nominated by going individually to different categories and predicting what's going to get nominated, doing a deep dive, individual videos on the big ones like Best Picture, but then also some of the smaller categories like Best Documentary. We've been having a lot of fun on this channel. So far, we're in our 10th season of predicting the Oscars. So we have a huge, long history of not only predicting them, but doing a great job at doing that. Very confident in our abilities, given the fact that, over the past 10 years, we've consistently shown up for 75%, 80, 85% predicting Oscar nominations, and then eventually predicting the Oscars. And today was a big day. Usually I have a video Monday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. That was delayed because the Oscar shortlists were today. I figured let's push the video a day, talk about the Oscar shortlists instead of predicting something and then just being wrong the next day once we learn what the shortlist ends up being. And because we're in the thick of things, we're going to be doing multiple videos a week. Now that we have this out, I still have to talk about the production design and costume design categories, which will be coming up on Friday. And then over the kind of Christmas break, one video at least, sometimes two videos a week when we get into Golden Globe predictions or Critics' Choice predictions and get more information. That will all be covered on this channel. But in this video, we're going to be talking about some of the snubs and surprises from this afternoon's recent Oscar shortlist announcement. And wanted to discuss that and essentially what it means for the Oscars. Talk about three snubs, what that means for those movies' chances generally, and then three surprises. Because ultimately, we really want to rely on the shortlists. We talk about how the Critics' Choice or Golden Globes can predict us, right? But those are different groups that don't have anything to do with the Oscars. And even when you try to use industry groups like the Costume Designers Guild, we know a lot of the members of the Academy, the Costume Designers branch, let's say, are in the Costume Designers Guild, but not all of them, or maybe not all of the members in the guild are a part of the Academy. But this is the most important one. This actually gives us an indication as to what's going to affect the Oscars. And the most perfect example, I think, was last year of how to kind of read things. And last year with Alien Romulus, I remember it got shortlisted for Best Score, Best Sound, and Best Visual Effects. Now, it really was only a contender in the Best Visual Effects category. But because it got nominated, or shortlisted rather, in the score and sound categories, it gave us the indication that this movie was generally well appreciated. There was a general appreciation for the technical elements of this film. So that when I was making my predictions for visual effects, I included Alien Romulus because I knew that it had a general appreciation within the Academy. Even though the movie didn't end up getting in for score or for sound, it gives us an indication of what movies are strong, what's the general appreciation amongst the technical categories of these branches, what do they appreciate, and how does that ultimately influence our Oscar predictions? Because this we should really rely on because it's the Oscars, it's the source. They're telling us right away which movies they do or do not like, or which movies they are kind of in consideration for, in contention for. So that's kind of my thinking. Going to start off with three snubs and three surprises, as well as talk about some, objective snubs or surprises, even though maybe I wasn't personally surprised. So starting off with the snubs portion of this video, the number one snub has to be The Testament of Ann Lee. Not only missing out in, let's say, the best song category, but also in the best sound or best score categories. That combined with the fact that it missed at the Costume Designers Guild was also a huge loss. And what we're kind of continually being told is that this isn't a strong Oscar contender. We thought that this was a movie that maybe at one point could compete for a Best Picture nomination, and its path would be through an Amanda Seyfried nomination, and then some of these other technical nominations. And despite that, we're just not seeing that show up. The Costume Designers Guild miss was a big miss. Same thing here with, not getting in for something like original song, get an expanded lineup, where other films had multiple songs nominated, this being a musical in a sorts, didn't get any nominations. That was a huge loss, and I do think we're at that stage of the season where I think you can kind of comfortably remove The Testament of Ann Lee from all of its categories at the Oscars. Maybe something like Amanda Seyfried, and this is a movie that maybe not a lot of people have seen, and that's the reason why. But when you have these shortlists, like, this is definitive. It can't get nominated for song or score or sound. So it's probably not going to get nominated for costume design. So then you're essentially saying, I'm going to predict production design and Amanda Seyfried. those chances and you want to read the kind of overall the way that the industry is viewing the film, they're not really appreciating it as a real serious Best Picture contender or one of the best movies of the year or a movie with some of the best craft of the year. A bit of a shame, personally, just because I really love the movie. But that being said, you have to kind of read the tea leaves, and I would probably encourage you, if you have The Testament of Anne Lee, even maybe including Amanda Seyfried in your predictions, you can kind of comfortably exit them out of your predictions. This is not going to be an Oscar contender this year. Then the second big snub of the morning was Wake Up Dead Man for not getting in for Best Casting. And maybe even generally Wake Up Dead Man. It seems as if Netflix hasn't really been pushing this film very hard. I thought when I saw the movie that maybe a Glenn Close would be in contention or maybe something like a screenplay. But it not getting in here for casting, I think, indicates two things. Number one, I think it indicates that Netflix isn't pushing very hard for this movie and that maybe this movie has a little bit of fatigue and it feels too similar to the other Knives Out movies and therefore it won't be in consideration. I think that's part of it. I think the other part of it, though, is this new category, this casting category, kind of telling us what it is. And the fact that Jay Kelly and Wake Up Dead Man did not get nominated here for casting, I think is indicative of what this group will likely nominate. Because Jay Kelly and Wake Up Dead Man are very celebrity focused. It's like big ensembles with lots of big flashy celebrities. And they didn't go for that. They actually went with more international titles. They went with more discoveries. So, breakouts in something like The Secret Agent or Surratt. Those were two big surprises for me that got in for ensemble. With big ensemble cast with a lot of unknown actors, there was an appreciation there. Of course, you have your bigger movies like A One Battle After Another or Sinners, but notably with both of those movies, they have kind of breakout stars. Same thing with Marty Supreme, breakout stars, unique casting. Frankenstein showing up in the casting category is notable, but also has, I think, just a general appreciation within the Academy as a Best Picture contender. So Wake Up Dead Man, I think, the fact that I didn't get in for casting indicates a couple of things for me. Obviously, won't get in for here, but maybe won't get in for adapted screenplay now. Definitely won't compete for picture. I don't think Glenn Close is a serious competitor potentially in supporting actress, and that Netflix just really isn't making this movie a main priority of theirs. And a bit of a surprise that, and maybe just an indication to us that this new casting category is not celebrity focused. It's not names focused. It actually is towards finding new discoveries, international films with unknown actors to the general public. Things like that, it seems to be what the casting branch is really starting to appreciate. That was notable, I thought. And then maybe the third and biggest snub of the morning was The Tale of Cillian not getting nominated or making the shortlist for Best Documentary Feature. This was a movie I had in just earlier this week. Was it second or third overall in my prediction rankings? It notably had won at the International Documentary Association and got nominated at Indie Spirits. And if you get both of those, it's a really good shot to get nominated at the Oscars. Doesn't matter, it didn't make the shortlist. That was a big surprise for me. It was really beloved by my model. A lot of those kind of industry precursors and ended up not getting the shortlist here. So that was kind of a really big surprise for me. The documentary branch is always super surprising. I know last year it was Superman, Christopher Reeve story, didn't get even shortlisted. And they're all constantly kind of making some big snubs. So you never really know with that branch, but I thought that was notable. So then just talking about generally some snubs that weren't surprises to me necessarily, but were surprises to a lot of people. Weapons not getting shortlisted for makeup was a surprise. Didn't really surprise me just because this branch has really been appreciating prosthetics. It's not necessarily a makeup category, as it is a prosthetics category. And if you think of weapons, you think of the great makeup of someone like an Aunt Gladys, but it's not prosthetics, which is why ultimately they didn't go with it. So, but a little bit of a surprise for a lot of people. I know a lot of people had weapons in their predictions. Same thing with Put Your Hand on Your Soul and Walk for the Best Documentary category. A lot of people had that. That was kind of their Tale of Cillian, where it was in a lot of people's number 2 or 3 spots. I never really considered it. It didn't get a lot of precursor nominations. My model didn't really like it. It ultimately did not get shortlisted. So that was kind of not a huge surprise for me, but notable. And then I also want to mention it was just an accident not getting in for casting. Kind of a notable one just because Surratt and Secret Agent did. So they did like international movies. They just didn't like maybe the casting of it. It was just an accident. Maybe it wasn't expansive enough. That was maybe something that I wanted to bring up. All the casting nominees were all large, expansive casts. So maybe there was a downside there for that film. But that was maybe definitely, I think, more of an objective miss as well. And then some other ones where, Wolfman for VFX didn't get in, or Mission Impossible not getting in for VFX was notable. Although some of these categories, these are 6th, 7th, 8th kind of contenders, not kind of top of the line ones that missed. And now talking about the three surprises of the morning. These are three films that I was surprised got as many shortlist mentions as they did. So not necessarily a snub in terms of a movie missing, but a surprise in terms of showing up here. And I think the first one, the big takeaway for me, is Surat. This was a movie that I think was surprised even when it got in for something like score at the Golden Globe. That was kind of a cool, interesting pick. And you look at the nominations and the shortlist here, not only does it get in for ensemble or casting, which was a big surprise for me, it also shows up in both score and sound and international feature. So there is a lot of just general appreciation clearly for this film. Now, this is a film that maybe even should be in consideration for Best Picture at this point. I think definitely it's in its slot for Best International Feature. There was a consideration. I know not a lot of people had actually had Surat, maybe in the 4th or 5th spot. It's definitely now, I think, within that top 5 for Best International Feature. And I would even consider it in something like Best Sound, Best Score. I'll be doing that video in probably about a week's time, uploading on this channel. And I think I'm going to include Surat in both of those predictions as well. So it's, like I said, with the Alien Romulus example, I'm not predicting it necessarily to get in for something like Best Picture necessarily, or I'm not necessarily predicting it to get in for Best Casting. But what it is an indication is that there's a general appreciation of this movie. People have been seeing this movie. People have been liking this movie. So, you know, I'm probably not going to predict it for cinematography, but I am going to predict it for something like maybe, definitely, I think, score, and then maybe even something like sound as well. Then the other kind of surprise was the fact that Wicked for Good held strong and did very well and got a lot of mentions here. Not only kind of getting in where it needed to in places like makeup and hair, and you even say something like VFX. I thought it was maybe going to get missed at VFX. It got in surprises. It overperformed and getting in at places I'd say like cinematography. Casting, you know, I predicted it, but was maybe unsure at this point. Casting still got in. Cinematography it still got in. It got both of the songs in. So there is still an appreciation for Wicked. I know with its poor reviews, there was a question about maybe chances of getting in for Best Picture. I wouldn't rule that out entirely. And what I do think is definitely solid is to repeat many of the nominations that it got. I kind of look at the wins that it got last year. So something like production design or costume design, or visual effects didn't win but got nominated. I think those kinds of nominations, in particular the ones where it won, it will likely kind of repeat with at least a nomination and then maybe miss out on some of the other categories. So I'm not predicting it for something like cinematography. I don't even think I'm going to predict it for something like score, but I think costume design, definitely. Visual effects, I think you have to definitely put it in. Production design, I may leave it out, but after, this performance here, maybe I have to put it back in. Going to be, some tough decisions there. But Wicked, the big concern was, is this movie dead on arrival? Is this movie even going to get any nominations? And even if it's not going to get in for Best Picture, I think we can confidently say it's probably going to get in for Ariana Grande and at least a song and probably a couple of these technical nominations. So it could potentially be a 4, 5, 6 nominated kind of a movie. And then the question then becomes in my mind, well, if it's going to get 5 technical nominations outside of Best Picture, why not Best Picture as well? The movie with the most amount of nominations that didn't get in for Best Picture was Carol back in 2015. It got 6 nominations and didn't get in for Best Picture, but that's rare. Most of the time you get 4 or 5 nominations, you also get nominated for Best Picture. Something to keep in mind for the Oscars, and what they're telling us is they still like Wicked. And then the final surprise that I kind of briefly mentioned was The Secret Agent getting in for Best on casting. The ensemble is very large. You have kind of unknown people and then known people like Wagner Moura. You have a great sense of community within the film, so I'm not surprised necessarily that it got in, but the fact that this is still an international movie that a lot of people don't even have in their Best Picture predictions. I currently do have the movie in, and I think, a surprise nomination, for example, in here, not only getting for something like international feature was expected, but getting into something like casting shows a general overall support, in particular for the acting within the film. So if it could potentially even sneak in for casting and it gets in for international feature, why not director? Why not screenplay? Why not picture? The Secret Agent is definitely surging. And then just some general other surprises that got nominated that I wasn't necessarily surprised with, but they're definitely objective surprises. One battle after another got in for makeup and hairstyling. I don't think a lot of people think about that movie and think about the makeup and hairstyling, but if Oppenheimer can get in, so can One Battle After Another. Similarly, we have something like Sound of Falling for cinematography. That got second place at Camera Image and was included as a possible contender in my cinematography video. but a lot of people hadn't really been seeing that, putting that on their radar. I also think that's a movie that potentially could get nominated for Best International Feature. I think keep an eye out for Sound of Falling, some definite appreciation there. And then Come See Me in the Good Light was a movie that I predicted within my 5 for Best Documentary, and I've seen no one else predict it, but it got in for Best Original Song, and it got in for Best Documentary here. Watch out for Come See Me in the Good Light. I think it's definitely a real contender for that Best Documentary slot, and maybe even for something like Song, kind of a hidden one that not a lot of people recognize and maybe were surprised by. I wasn't. I've been predicting it, but I was glad to see that they still showed up because I noticed that a lot of people weren't predicting that, so just want to keep that on your radar as well. But that's about it. I hope you enjoyed this. A little bit of a bonus video. Apologies for it being a little pushed today, but I wanted to talk about the shortlists as they came out. And subscribe to the channel. There's going to be a video on either Thursday or Friday. Then there's going to be another video on Mondays. And we're going to kind of continue that pace going on throughout the rest of the season, predicting the Oscars nominations, and then eventually predicting the Oscars. So I hope you enjoyed the video. And yeah, that's about it. Until next time, stay tuned.